everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you from Ad Gully. In our sixth edition of the Thought Leadership Series, we are privileged to have Mr. Shiv Kumar, Group Executive President, Aditya Birla Group. Shiv Kumar, or Shiv as is popularly known, is one of India's longest-serving CEOs. He is currently the Group Executive President at Aditya Birla Group. He has worked across multiple categories and industries and has handled over 60 brands in his long-standing career. He was the CEO for Nokia in India and subsequently led the company's emerging market unit. He was also the chairman and CEO for PepsiCo South Asia. He is regarded as one of India's leading management and leadership thinkers and speaker. Joining Shiv Kumar will be R. Sridhar, who will be moderating today's session. R. Sridhar is a leadership and innovation coach and partner of Ideas RS. He is also the former director of Ogilvy & Mather and was instrumental in launching the Ogilvy & Mather Direct in India. He is also the author of the book, Unlock the Real Power of Ideation. So without taking any further time, let us now straight away move into this interesting conversation with our guest, Shiv Kumar. Over to you, Sridhar.
Thank you, Ganpati. Absolutely delighted to see you after a long time.
Pleasure, Sridhar. Long time no see.
Absolutely. I've been your admirer from day one. Okay. Today, I'm getting an opportunity to ask you a question that I always wanted to ask you. But for some reason or the other, we never got around to doing that. Okay. The first thing is about many congratulations on your new book, The Right Choice. I see it is already on the bestseller list, and not a surprise, of course. Okay. So let me start with your relationship with Ram Charan. I mean, somebody I always admire, a true thought leader. How and when did it start, your relationship with Ram Charan?
Yes. So I was on a general manager's course from Unilever at 4 Acres, London. And Ram came and spent a week with us. And so I got to know him very well. Then that time he was consulting for GE, Coke, etc. So every evening I would make it a point to spend, at least an hour with him after, the day was over and really probe his brain and learn as much as I can. And so after that, we just continued being friends. And then he interviewed me for some of his books. And then whenever he used to come to India, we'd sit and have long discussions about the future of business, etc. And in fact, in 2012-13, I bumped into him in Dubai airport when I was running emerging markets. Okay. And then he told me, and that's what mentors can truly do. He said, Shiv, I think you're wasting your time in Nokia. Nokia doesn't have a future. I think it's time for you to move on. Just don't this. He introduced me to a few people globally, etc. But I didn't want to go and take a global job. And then again, we reconnected now. He's on the board of one of the ABG companies. So that's how I've known Ram for more than 20 years. And it's been a very fruitful relationship. I just did a session with him for BitSong, the Birla Institute and School of Management. So it's always great fun to learn from him. He's got such energy and such lovely ideas.
Yeah, and such clarity. I mean, it's sort of glaring in your eyes every time he says it, and then he said, I wish I thought it like that, right? Amazing. Okay, let me ask you this question. You seem to be doing so many things, Shiv. Reading, writing, speaking in various forums, holding various offices, professional bodies like the AMA. How do you manage your time? The secret is something you must share with us.
There's no secret to managing time. The first thing is, you must always give your job 110%. Okay, that's absolutely critical. You cannot participate in what I call co-curricular or extracurricular activities by hurting your job. That is a no-no.
Brilliant.
So to me, in a day, the job occupies the job, the time, the thought. I have to give it 110%. Okay, that's number one. Second is, I've always believed that it's important for every professional to contribute back to society. Okay. To contribute in some way or the other. So I've been on many IIM boards. I've been on the Ahmedabad board. I was on the audit committee of IIM Calcutta. I'm on the XLRI board. I'm on the XIMB board. I'm on the IIM Udaipur board, etc. So education and business education is something that has always appealed to me. So I try and contribute my time there. The next thing is other aspects of industry. People will call you for, to make speeches at various events, etc. If you are an industry leader, then you have to commit to that also.
Okay.
The way to manage your time, I always find, is two things, Sridhar. One is managing your dead time. Dead time is time you're sitting in a car, you're sitting in an aircraft, most people tend to do nothing. Okay, I tend to use that time well. Either I clear my mails, or I read something, or I write something, whatever it is. I tend to use a lot of my dead time. Okay, both, whether it is professional or personal. The second thing about time management is having as few distractions as possible.
Okay.
So one of the things the younger generation needs to know is to avoid distractions.
Okay.
You're doing something, you want to do something else, you end up doing 4 things in 1 hour, and none of them to even 50% level. So if you really want to manage time well, avoid distractions. And finally, when you manage your work well, when you manage your discipline well, those are what I call become repeatable habits or super habits. Then you tend to take lesser and lesser time for them over time, and that releases more time. So it's a constant virtuous cycle. You have to plan, execute, learn, do it again, and that's what helps you manage time. That's at least it's helped me, Sridhar. That's all I can say.
Fascinating. So one thing that occurred to me as you were talking, this thing about multitasking. Now, is it really possible for somebody to multitask and be effective and efficient? I have a major problem doing that. I can't do it.
So you're right. I think in a physical world, it's very difficult. In a physical world, for example, if we are sitting in a meeting and somebody is chairing the meeting, or you are chairing the meeting, okay, it's very difficult to multitask because everybody's eyes are on you. On the other hand, in a virtual world, when 95% of the people have put the screen off, they are listening to what is being said, there are other things that you can do. So I personally believe multitasking has gone up in a virtual world as opposed to a physical world.
So, I mean, the corollary to that, has productivity also gone up in spite of all?
Productivity has gone up significantly in a virtual world, because I think people have dedicated their time and completed tasks because you're no longer present in the same office or in the same environment. You have to collaborate horizontally. And so you need to hand over to somebody else for somebody else to do a proper job. So informally, SLAs have come into place in most organizations in a virtual world.
Collaborate horizontally is a wonderful expression. The other thing I admire about you is the way you maintain relationships, Shiv. We have known each other for almost 22 years, as far as I remember, from your Unilever days. And I used to be in the Apijay House office, and later on I started there. What is the secret of your ability to maintain relationship with the same kind of intensity, if I might want to use the expression?
Yeah, I think it's very important, Sridhar, when you define your circle, the family is a given, right? Whether it's your parents, siblings, kids, wife, etc. That's a given. You maintain close relationships with people. Second bunch of people you tend to have close relationships with is your classmates. Some classmates over time, etc. Third bunch of people you tend to have close relationships with is people you work with, colleagues, ex-colleagues, etc. Very rarely do people have a broader interest in industry people and people who never work with them or are not part of their family.
Right.
So my simple, philosophy is that you must keep in touch with friends and you must always, reply to them. I tend to reply to every SMS, every WhatsApp, every email I get. Okay. That's my basic philosophy.
Right.
Unless, of course, I feel that the other person is taking advantage of me or pushing me in the wrong direction. Then I say, hey, not enough. Let's stay off. The second thing I committed to myself was, whether it's a classmate or anybody who's worked for me, if they call me for an event for their company or something to do with their family, I always say yes. I always prioritize that. Because I believe if you don't invest in your friends and you don't invest in people who have given you something when you are running that company, then I don't think you are treating them well. Okay.
Right.
That's the second one. The third one is, when you build friendships, a lot of people, unfortunately today, Sridhar, want to build friendships if they see a benefit from the other person. And I have never looked at it that way ever. I've always assumed best intent. I've tried to help as many people as I can. If my time and my commitment manages it, okay, you should be in a friendship not expecting anything. If you get something back, it's positive, it's a bonus. But you should be in the friendship because you like the person and not because you want something from that person. So that's how I look at it. And I'm lucky that I have a lot of good friends like you.
I think I was trying to understand how do you manage the art of not saying no and still manage all your time. Today, I got some very interesting insights from you. Thanks for that. So let me come to thought leadership. What exactly is thought leadership? Because everybody talks about it. When you ask them, saying, but can you define what it is? And they're then sort of dancing around. So how do you define thought leadership? How do you recognize a thought leader and what makes them different?
Yeah, thought leadership, very simply stated, Sridhar, is deep expertise in a field. That's all, as simple as that. Okay. You are a thought leader in the direct marketing space, as simple as that. You knew more about the topic than most of the people. You were the go-to person for that. You had ideas for that. You looked at the past, you calibrated the present, and forecasted the future. That's what thought leaders are about. They are the go-to person on that particular topic or whatever it is. So a good thought leader has that element at his or her core. They're able to look at the future. Okay, they just don't necessarily come at it from the past. And I've always found that thought leaders have very good insights. They're able to offer you something else. Okay, they're able to connect 2 + 2 and give you something more than 4. And they're able to make you think differently about either the situation or the problem or the context, whatever it is. So let me give you some examples of thought leaders from the past.
Right.
Let's take somebody like John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy in the 1960s said, we'll put a man on the moon, bring him back safely, to Earth. Now, he was not a scientist, right? He was not a space engineer, but he put that thought into Americans and the whole world. And that spurred a huge lot of innovation, etc. in NASA. And sure enough, 1969, 10 years later, they did that. So was John F. Kennedy a thought leader for America and the space program? Almost certainly yes. Was he a rocket scientist? No. So that's one point. Martin Luther King. Today we talk of inclusion and equality. Look at that famous speech of Martin Luther King, that one day my children will break bread at the table with white kids. Nobody can say that better today compared to 50 years ago. So Martin Luther King was an absolute thought leader in the area of race, in the area of equality, in the area of inclusion, 50 years before his time. Okay. M.K. Gandhi was a thought leader in terms of taking ahimsa to a completely new level, to saying, look, I don't want to fight somebody physically. I will fight him intellectually with what is available at my disposal. And I will reject what he says or does, which does not serve my country. Then you take Jack Welch, was a very successful thought leader. I think a number of the organization innovations and discussions we've had over the last 25 years owe something or the other to Jack Welch. I think he was a phenomenal thought leader. Peter Drucker was an outstanding thought leader. He started in Austria, didn't want to be working in an organization or a CEO, and then went on to be one of the most successful consultants. The whole issue of managing an organization like an orchestra, a matrix organization, is a Drucker idea.
Absolutely.
MBO is a Drucker concept. SBU or a profit center concept is a Drucker concept. Span of control is a Drucker concept. So they give you new concepts to think about. Okay, that's what thought leaders do. Ram Charan, who we discussed, has been a thought leader. Robert McNamara, Ford Motor Company, the World Bank, President Kennedy is, the Secretary of Defense, another thought leader. So the list can go on. I would say thought leaders tend to exhibit broader interests. They have a futuristic ability. They have an ability to energize you with their thoughts. So that's what I would say is a good thought leader in my book.
As you are describing all of these personalities, who I've been admiring, I found 2 or 3 commonalities. One thing was they're all dreamers, right? And they also dreamt about things that seemed impossible at the time when they dreamt it. Impossible didn't stop them, right? So, that's an amazing way in which you explain thought leaders. So who are the thought leaders you admire from India and abroad, any field, and why? Let's look at all kinds of fields, even beyond business.
Absolutely right. Thank you for that question. That's a great question. So if I look at thought leaders today in India and abroad, let's take cricket as a passion with India, right? My very good friend Harsha Bogle, he's a great thought leader. He started in advertising, went to radio, today television, okay, he's understood the nuance of cricket and where cricket is headed. He's understood the nuance of digital entertainment and digital commentary. Okay, so Harsha Bhogle is a true thought leader, and every conversation I have with Harsha and Anita is such a pleasure every time I listen to them and converse with them. TK Arun, ex-editor of Times of India. Right. Now he writes on his own, okay, for the Federal. Another outstanding thought leader. TK Arun, I've spent many conversations with him. He can talk on any topic from politics to business to economics. He is an outstanding thought leader, and I follow him regularly. I think Piyush Pandey in advertising is a wonderful thought leader. See, over 30 years, how he's kept himself relevant to the latest consumer segment and the latest trends in advertising. So Piyush has done a great job of that. Yeah. So one point I definitely want to make to you, which I see, Sridhar, is that title doesn't make a thought leader. A lot of CEOs think that just because they have a title, they become a thought leader. Never, ever.
Yeah. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Today's world, if I were to look outside the country, somebody like Adam Grant, okay, outstanding thought leader on leadership, on psychology, on organization structures and behavior. Simon Sinek, okay, another great thought leader. Byron Shaw in marketing. Okay, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. Entertainment has had many, many thought leaders because the basis of entertainment is constantly to change and challenge yourself.
Right.
Business does not have so many thought leaders because most business CEOs and leaders think of incremental gains. They don't think of fundamental pivots. Whereas in the entertainment business, you need to think of fundamental pivots. Otherwise, you lose an audience every generation virtually. So great entertainment brands who have been thought leaders. The Beatles have been outstanding thought leaders. Even today, they're the most popular. Their music is so popular and, they really captured the imagination. In India, closer home, Amitabh Bachchan is a fantastic thought leader. Look at where he started and where he is today. He's just amazing, So these are the thought leaders in my book, both India and abroad.
So as you're describing all the thought leaders abroad as well as in India, one thought that occurred to me is that thought leaders are not afraid of risk. Is that right?
Yeah. So the way I look at it is risk and opportunity are two sides of the same coin. Okay. And risk has a probability attached with it. Always remember that. Okay. Something can be 1% risky. Taking a flight is 0.02% risky. Okay. But every time you take a flight, it's amazing. Everybody will wish you a safe flight. Okay. Now, on the other hand, betting on the cryptocurrency is a 95% risk today. But people still take it. So the appetite for risk is determined by your outlook to risk and challenge. Some people take it, some people don't.
So do thought leaders tend to take more risks than the normal people?
I would say thought leaders, by their definition, when they look at the future, they are predicting something which might happen, might not happen. But I would say a good thought leader is one who gets about 60-70% right. He won't get everything right, but he will get about 60 right.
And the other side is that failure never stops them.
It cannot stop you. If you're a thought leader, you're imagining the future. So you encounter it, you take it off. I think a very good example of that is C.K. Prahalad, outstanding thought leader. The bottom of the pyramid was the last big concept in my book from an outstanding teacher. I knew him well too. And CK started his own company and he failed. And when somebody asked him, look, you're an outstanding consultant, why did you fail? He said, look, I'm a thought leader, but running of a business requires blocking and tackling, which I was not good at.
Right.
And hence I failed there, and it's better to wind it up, which was Praja. Okay, so he recognized where his strengths were and he avoided it.
And he was fair enough, in fact, forthright enough to actually say it in so many words to people. I mean, so he didn't hedge the issue.
Absolutely.
Right? So who are the thought leaders around us today, that people you admire, not from the distant past? I mean, people who are their current modern day thought leaders in India and abroad.
That's what I just gave you the list. Harsha, TK Arun, Piyush, Adam Grant, Simon Sinek, Byron Shaw, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. And even in our current situation, somebody like Clayton Christensen was a thought leader. Okay, definitely. I think Tarun Khanna from Harvard Business School, Pankaj Ghemawat, Harbir Singh. Okay, professors tend to be good thought leaders, is my opinion, because they look ahead.
Okay. That's their profession, to think,
Absolutely, that's a profession.
to gaze in the future and so on and
Yeah.
so forth.
And predict it. Yes.
Any tips on how one can become a thought leader? I mean, do these people consciously say, I want to become a thought leader, or just start and then they happen to become a thought leader? What is the way it happens?
It's like this.
Yeah.
You can't be a thought leader if you don't have followers, right? Somebody must follow you. Hey, you know what? You're a thought leader in this. I want to follow you. So a thought leader in my book has to be known for something. In brands, we say the core. What's the core of the brand?
Right.
What do you stand for?
Right.
Okay. What do you promise? So like that, a thought leader has to be a go-to person for something. Okay. He has to have a point of view about that. Second is, there's no point in being a thought leader and being in a closet. You need to be available, right?
Yeah.
There's no point in saying, I have great thoughts, but I will put it in my room and, in my cupboard. That doesn't work. If you want a thought leader, you want followers, then you need to be out there. You need to be available. I think a very important distinction I'd like to make is that your thought leadership must be independent of your company. So, for example, I should be a thought leader independent of my role in a company. If I'm seen as a thought leader just because I'm a marketing manager in Hindustan Unilever or Procter & Gamble, that is wrong, which is what I said. It doesn't come with title. I have to have my own savviness to say this guy is damn good, irrespective of the title. Okay. So when I speak, I never quote examples from my company ever. And right through for 25, 30 years. Never, ever. Do that, then you're leaning on your company and what it offers you. Your skill as a thought leader is in being able to take other examples and quote to people how you see that. That is where the value is. Okay. So some of the things which have worked for me as thought leadership is as follows. One, I'm always available to speak, to communicate, to give my thoughts where I believe I can add value and if I have the time, number one. Number two, I never sponsor any event where I speak. My company has never sponsored an event where I speak.
Right.
So people will write in and say, hey, you know what? There's somebody who wrote in and say, hey, you know what? We'll give you a keynote, opening keynote. If your company sponsors, I told Poonam call in Nokia, answer is no. I will speak if there's no monetary stuff involved. Okay, number one. Okay, I never do panels. Poonam Kaul, who was my head of comms both in Nokia and PepsiCo, she worked for me for 12, 13 years, outstanding lady. She said, Shiv, you tend to prepare a lot. And when you go on a panel, you get, 5 sentences, 10 sentences. Most of the 99% of the panels are underprepared. They're just talking at the top of the hat. It's a waste of your time. Yeah. She was able to see that. And I said, I absolutely agree with you. I don't do panels unless, of course, that's absolutely essential for the government or something like that. Otherwise, I never do panels. Okay. Next, I have never paid to speak in my life. I never pay. Full stop. There are so many people who will pay. I never do that. Absolutely never. And lastly, I've never paid for any award. If people write in and say, hey, we want to give you this award, 50,000, I said, thank you. No. Correct. So you have to maintain a set of principles when you're a thought leader. Absolutely. So if I accept a speaking engagement or an interview engagement like this, I tend to prepare thoroughly and I land up there to provide value to my consumer or customer. I treat them with respect. Okay. You cannot be a thought leader if you take your audience for granted.
Absolutely.
Yohini Menuhin said, and somebody asked him, why do you practice? He said, if I don't practice for a day, I notice it. If I don't practice for 2-3 days, the critics notice it. If I don't practice for a week, the audience notices it. I once heard Vijay Singh, the famous golfer, he practices a lot, morning before the round, afternoon after the round. At the British Open golf, somebody asked him, why do you practice so hard? He turned the club, pointed to the entrance and said, you know what? People pay their hard-earned money to come and watch me play. I don't want to let them down.
Right.
So you have to stay committed to your audience if you want to be a thought leader.
Right. So two things I heard you say is that wanting to be a thought leader is a self-motivated kind of thing. I'm not saying that I want to become a thought leader, but I want to become an expert in something. and then share whatever I know about that very generously with people. That is one characteristic of a thought leader. The other thing is that, is it possible for you to groom thought leaders? Has that happened?
Yes, that's a very good question. You groom thought leaders by what I call structural thinking. A very good question. I'm sure you know him. Rishi Bhattacharya, who used to be the marketing director in Hindustan, was very, very good at that. When you sat in a meeting with Rishi, he would ask you the structural questions. Where is this industry headed 5 years from now? What role will your brand have? How will profit pools look in this industry? How will segments look in this industry? So, when somebody asks you those deep probing questions, then automatically your game improves. So one of the rules for good leaders is to challenge people to think at a higher level and challenge people to think differently. There is sameness in a number of people's thinking. There's sameness in industry. Today, the strategy in most companies is similar. It's only execution which is different.
Correct.
So you have to impinge on thinking if you want to develop thought leaders.
And you have to raise the bar.
You have to raise the bar. Mr. Gopal Krishnan, who was my boss, was another person like that. He would challenge you to think differently.
Yeah. Any tips on how one can become a thought leader? Partly you also answered it. But is that a conscious effort on the person?
You need to have a broad range of interests. You need to be well read. You need to be able to make the connections with the various dots. Okay, and you should look beyond your industry. Okay, you cannot be a genuine thought leader if you're only confined to your industry. Okay, Jack Welch's contribution was well beyond the conglomerate he ran or the industry he ran. Ram Charan's is much wider than where he is. Today, he's talking about Amazon. In the past, he talked about GE. In the past, he talked about Coca-Cola. He covers a wide range and spectrum, and he stays relevant to the times and is projecting ahead of time. So that's how you become a thought leader. More important, I think, you need to be able to communicate succinctly.
Right.
Okay, and hit the nail on the head, which is what people take out. Because in today's rushed world, people want what I call condensed information capsules.
That's right.
Want short bites stuck in and out.
Correct.
That's what I mean.
So the other thing that I'm getting from you is like thought leadership is an outcome, is not a destination.
You can never plan that. You can never ever plan. You cannot say, I want to be a thought leader.
Yeah.
You take, for example, the cricket world today.
Yeah.
Okay, there are some outstanding cricketers who are not thought leaders, but there are some cricketers who change the destiny of their cricket nation or cricket itself. So you have different sets of people.
So the last thing that I want to come, I was looking at your website recently. I'm absolutely full of admiration for this. What might have been the brief you gave the web designer?
Good question. So as we developed this website, a girl called Divya Karnal was the person who set up the website for me. And she did a very good job. One of the things, and my wife gave some inputs, Hamsini, in the early days. After that, one of the things I did was, as the website was getting developed, I sent it to a number of my friends who I knew would be critical. Who would say, hey, this doesn't work. This is bad. This color combination is bad. This font is bad. The friction is high, etc. So there's Aarti Kelshikar, who's an author in Singapore. She's pretty, absolutely ruthless in commenting. Then there was Anusha from Autumn, Karan, Amina, etc. Now, as I sent it to my friends, who I've named a few of them, and they gave me feedback, this is what they said. They said, Shiv, your website must reflect you. And the characteristics we would expect in your website are for it to be simple, free-flowing, low friction, transparent, honest, bright, and not dull. They said, look, those are the words which we would use to describe you, and that's what should be in your website.
Right. That's the brand.
Okay, so I went by that, but I genuinely asked for really honest and tough feedback from people who knew they would tell me the truth because they wanted my best interest.
Yes. So they were happy to tell you what they felt rather than what believed, what might be pleasing Shiv, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Anything else I should have asked Shiv that I have not asked yet in this conversation? Which something I didn't know.
You could have asked me, what am I afraid of? I'm afraid of flying, even though I take 2 flights a day, 2 flights a week, sorry. Okay. my dad passed away in an air accident, and after that, I've read how do I counter it? I've read everything about flights and air disasters for the last 50 years. So I can tell you what a pilot will do before he does it. So it's a reflex mechanism. I track the weather pattern before I fly, if I'm flying long distance, to see where the weather pattern is, to see whether I will go through turbulence or bumps on the flight. So I prepare myself for it.
You touched upon a very important issue called fear. Do thought leaders entertain any kind of fear in the way in which they go about things? Is there something that worries them?
Very good question. I said this to Aparna Piramal Raja, I think, in an interview in sometime about 5-6 years ago. The biggest fear, she asked me, what do you have as a fear as a manager? I said, my biggest fear is to stay relevant. The day I'm irrelevant, I'm not needed. So the challenge for every thought leader is to stay relevant. Many thought leaders, like Amitabh Bachchan, has stayed relevant, right, even today?
Yeah.
Starting his career in the 1970s.
Yes.
He's still a force to reckon with. Would anybody else following him have the same thing? The answer is no. Ram Charan has stayed relevant even today. Okay, Gandhi is relevant even today.
Right.
So the ability to stay relevant at that point of time is the biggest challenge to thought leadership. So when leaders, because of that title, start giving you examples of what they did 10 years ago, they're clearly irrelevant. And people in the room, especially the millennials, they start rolling their eyes. They say, hey, this guy's lost. Yeah. We don't care what he did in Hindustan Lever 10 years ago. Who's bothered? The world is different today. Yeah. So staying relevant, I think, is the biggest fear for any thought leader.
So what does it take to be relevant? That's a very important thing, right?
I think the world is changing. The context of the world is changing. So understanding the changing world, the changing context, understanding the changing nature of your audience. Say in the past, you could go and talk at an event for half an hour or 45 minutes and speak eloquently. Today, you might have 10 minutes. People are distracted. People are on their phones. If you're not able to catch their attention, you can speak for 5 minutes, you can speak for 5 hours. They won't listen to you. So understanding the context and giving them something of value, which they say, hey, you know what? This guy made me think differently about the same thing. I think pushing that boundary, I think, is what makes it.
So what are some of the things that you might be doing at a personal level to stay relevant?
I speak to people from, number one, I travel a lot.
Okay.
I travel to the market continuously. I can assure you, I know more about most brands and how they're doing in the marketplace than most companies, brand managers or marketing managers or CEOs. Because every time I go to the outlet, I ask about various categories. I ask the retailer which innovations are new. Okay, which innovation is working? Which innovation is failing? Why is it failing? Please tell me why. I engage with a lot of entrepreneurs and ask them how things are going. They give me a different sense. I talk to people from outside my industry. And I try to stay abreast by reading books about the future. There's a lovely book I'm reading right now about artificial intelligence, written by Eric Schmidt and Henry Kissinger on the future. Kissinger is relevant even in today's world. Yeah. People talk to him about what America should be doing about Afghanistan. Okay, so that's how I try and stay relevant.
So in your current role, I mean, the outside world might perceive it as a head office kind of role, right? So how do you maintain this, being in touch with the market, being in touch with customers, being in touch with the various segments and so on?
So see, the thing about roles, Sashida, that's a good question again you ask. You should never define the role by the job description you have.
Okay, brilliant.
Job description is there to match you to that. That's more.
Yes.
A role is what you do, how you define it yourself.
Right.
Okay. If you say, I'm going to take a broader stab at this, rather than just giving advice, I will actually be practical about it rather than giving theoretical advice. Okay. And I'll back that practical advice with real life examples and data. Then you'll have a different role.
Okay.
So don't be constrained by the job description is what I would tell everybody. Thought leaders are never confined by the descriptions of a job ever. That's why they're thought leaders.
One last question, if you permit me. I think you're so passionate about everything that you're doing and you're talking about and you're speaking about. What is the connection between passion and thought leadership?
I think both flow into each other. Here's the thing, if you're not passionate about something, you'll never do it. Number one. Number two, if you're not passionate about something, others will notice it. Others will notice it very easily. Yeah. You can't fake it. You can't fake passion.
Right.
So again, I go back, go to the core of who you are and invest energy and time in that. Because life is too short. Don't waste your time over 20 things which add no value to anybody in the world. Focus on a few things and say, hey, I want to add value to this. And I will give it my very best. The big advantage today, Sridhar, is social media.
Yeah.
Okay. You can be on LinkedIn, you can be on Instagram, you can be on Twitter. You can get followership based on where you are headed. So you have the platform, which in the old days, if you went back 50 years, the only platform for your thought leadership, believe it or not, was the soapbox in Hyde Park.
Okay.
That's it. That was the equivalent of thought leadership, right? Social platform.
Right.
You stood on a soapbox and you told the world what you thought about on a sunny afternoon in Hyde Park. Today, you can tell people anything you want. Okay, but I find that people have deteriorated. They post pictures, they post irrelevant stuff, they post comments on sex, on religion, on all kinds of rubbish which they shouldn't. And the whole journey seems to be to get likes and this and that, which I think is irrelevant. Thought leaders don't bother about that.
That's right. So the honest introspection, it's a very important thing for the thought leader. Is that
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Shiv, I can go on. I get so excited when I see you and talk to you. But I think we are more or less arrived at the closure time. I can't thank you enough for what you have done for us. For the way you carried on the conversation. It's like old times where we've had conversations in the past, right? I'm absolutely delighted, absolutely grateful. Look forward to being in touch with you regularly as often. Thank you,
Sridhar, for everything you've done through my career. You've always been a huge support. You're one of the first guys who predicted that I would be a CEO. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Shiv.
All the best.
Bye.
Thank you, Shiv.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, Ganpati.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody at Agility.
Have a great day, guys. Bye. Thank you.